First contact, last warning. The stars had never seemed so cold to Admiral Sarah Chen as they did that morning. Standing on the observation deck of the research station orbiting Kepler 442 bits, she watched the sunrise paint the planet's 3 moons in shades of amber and gold. For 18 months, this system had been humanity's proudest achievement, a perfect world, teeming with life, where human colonists had built their first successful off-world society. That peace was about to end forever. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission," Lieutenant Rodriguez called from the communications array. His voice carried a tension that made Chen's stomach tighten. It's not from Earth." Chen moved to the command center, her boots echoing against the metal deck. Around her, the skeleton crew of the orbital station continued their morning routines, unaware that their lives were about to change. The main screen flickered to life, revealing something that made every human in the room freeze. The being on the screen was massive, easily 8 feet tall, with chitinous armor covering its body and 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws. Its head was angular, predatory, with glowing red eyes that seemed to burn with ancient malice. When it spoke, its voice was like grinding stone. "Inferior species," the creature began, its words automatically translated by the station's systems. "I am More Commander Vextal of the Kithaeron Empire. You will identify yourselves and prepare for immediate subjugation." Chen stepped forward, her naval training keeping her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Colonial Defense Force. You are in human space. State your intentions." A sound that might have been laughter rumbled from the alien's throat. "Human space? Amusing. There is no such thing. There is only Kithaeron space, and soon to be Kithaeron space. Your species has 47 of your minutes to surrender unconditionally." The screen displayed images that made Chen's blood run cold. Dozens of massive warships hung in space beyond the system's edge, each one dwarfing humanity's largest vessels. Weapon ports glowed with ominous energy, and sensor readings showed power signatures beyond anything in human technology. "Your terms?" Chen asked, though she already knew she wouldn't like the answer. "Total surrender. 80% of your population will serve as laborers in our industrial complexes. The remaining 20% will provide genetic material for our breeding programs. Your technology, your resources, your very existence belongs to the Empire now. Comply, and your deaths will be quick when we no longer need you." The communications officer beside Chen went pale. Behind her, she could hear someone being sick. The Kithaerons weren't offering slavery. They were offering extinction with extra steps. Chen had served in the Terran Navy for 23 years. She'd fought pirates in the asteroid belt, survived the Titan Station disaster, and led evacuation efforts during the Great Solar Storm of 2387. She'd seen the best and worst of humanity, had watched people sacrifice everything for strangers they'd never met. The idea of surrendering these people, these families, to become playthings for an alien empire made something cold and hard crystallize in her chest. "Counteroffer," she said, her voice carrying across the command center with absolute authority. "You have 30 seconds to leave our system before we make you leave." The war commander's eyes widened slightly. "You dare threaten the Kithaeron Empire? We have conquered 47 star systems. We have burned worlds for sport. Your pathetic species has barely left its own solar system." Chen stepped closer to the screen, her gray eyes blazing with fury that surprised even her. "Then let me be very clear, War Commander. You want war? Then face annihilation." She cut the transmission. The command center erupted in chaos. Officers shouted questions, junior staff looked around in panic, and the communications array began screaming with incoming transmissions from Earth. Chen ignored all of it, moving to the tactical station with mechanical precision. "Rodriguez, send a priority alpha transmission to Earth Command. Full tactical data on these hostiles. Request immediate deployment of all available assets." "Admiral, with respect," Lieutenant Torres interrupted. "Our entire colonial fleet is maybe 30 ships. They have what looks like 100 vessels out there, each one 10 times larger than our biggest cruiser. Chen turned to face her crew, and they fell silent at the expression on her face. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something much more dangerous. "Lieutenant, do you know what makes humans different from every other species we've encountered?" she asked quietly. "We're the only ones who look at impossible odds and get angry instead of afraid." As if to punctuate her words, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The Kitharans weren't waiting for their deadline. On the main screen, 3 human transport ships appeared, returning from a supply run to the mining platforms in the asteroid belt. They were civilian vessels, unarmed, carrying nothing but supplies and the families of the miners. The Kitharan fleet moved to intercept them with horrifying efficiency. "Civilian vessels, this is Admiral Chen," she broadcast on all frequencies. "Emergency jump protocols now. Get out of there." But it was too late. Beams of coherent energy lanced out from the alien warships, and the transport vessels simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris field. They were there one moment, and gone the next, along with the 347 men, women, and children aboard them. The command center fell deadly silent. Chen stared at the empty space where the ships had been, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles had gone white. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but every person in the room heard her clearly. "All stations, condition red. Prepare for combat operations, and someone get me a direct line to Project Prometheus." Lieutenant Rodriguez looked up from his console, confusion clear on his face. "Admiral, Project Prometheus was classified above my clearance level." "What is it?" Chen's smile was colder than the space between the stars. "Insurance, Lieutenant. Very expensive, very secret insurance that we hoped we'd never need." She activated her personal communication system, using codes she'd memorized, but never thought she'd use. "This is Admiral Chen, authorization Delta 77 Alpha. I need to speak with Dr. Elizabeth Kane immediately." The response came within seconds, a woman's voice crackling through quantum encryption. "Sarah, my God, is it time?" "It's time, Beth. How long do you need?" 6 hours for full deployment. 12 for maximum effectiveness." Chen looked at the tactical display, showing the approaching Kitharan fleet. "You have 4 hours. Make it count." While the station's crew began emergency preparations, Chen retreated to her private office to make the hardest call of her career. The quantum communicator connected her directly to Earth, to a small office buried 3 miles beneath the surface of the Antarctic ice sheet. "Admiral Chen," came the gravelly voice of General Marcus Hayes, chairman of the Terran Defense Council. "I've been expecting your call. How bad is it?" "Worse than our worst-case scenarios, sir. They're not interested in coexistence or negotiation. They want slaves and breeding stock. They just vaporize 3 civilian transports to prove a point." A long pause. "Casualties. 347, including 63 children under the age of 10. The pause was longer this time. When Hayes spoke again, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Rules of engagement are now unrestricted. Use whatever means necessary. The gloves are off. Admiral." "Understood, sir. And Project Prometheus. Authorized. God help us all." Chen cut the connection and returned to the command center, where her crew was working with desperate efficiency. The station's defensive systems were powering up, though everyone knew they were barely adequate against a single Kitharan cruiser, let alone an entire fleet. "Status report," she ordered. "Colonial fleet is responding." Torres reported. 26 ships en route. ETA 3 hours. Earth is dispatching everything they can spare, but they won't arrive for at least 18 hours. And the Kitharans. Moving to attack formation. They'll be in weapons range in 90 minutes. Chen nodded grimly. It was going to be the longest 90 minutes in human history. What the Kitharans didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for this day since they first looked up at the stars. not preparing for exploration or peaceful contact, but preparing for war. Because humans, alone among all the species they had met, understood a fundamental truth about the universe. If you wanted peace, you had better be prepared for war. Deep in the asteroid belt, automated systems that had been dormant for decades began to wake up. Massive engines ignited, computer systems activated, and weapons that had never been tested outside of simulations began their targeting sequences. Project Prometheus was humanity's darkest secret and brightest hope. A network of weaponized asteroids, each one a potential planet killer, hidden throughout the solar system and its neighboring stars. As the Kithaeron fleet closed in on Kepler 442 bits, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in her command center and prepared to show them exactly what happened when you threatened the human species. The war commander had called them inferior, had demanded their surrender, had murdered their civilians. He was about to learn why that was a mistake. The first phase of the battle began as the sun set over the human colony below. Kithaeron fighters screamed through the atmosphere, their weapons reducing the carefully built settlements to smoking craters. On the orbital station, Chen watched her people die and felt something break inside her chest. Not her resolve, but the last vestiges of her mercy. All colonial fleet vessels, this is Admiral Chen. She broadcast as the first human ships arrived in system. Weapons free. No quarter. Show them what happens when they mess with our family. The real war was about to begin. Human fury awakens. Captain Marcus Webb had always believed that space was too big for hatred, but as he watched the Kithaeron fleet systematically destroying human settlements on Kepler 442 bits, he discovered he was wrong. Hatred filled every meter of the void between the stars, and it was growing stronger by the second. His ship, the Defiance, was humanity's newest and most experimental vessel. Unlike the blocky, utilitarian designs of most human ships, the Defiance was sleek and predatory, its hull black as the space between stars. It was also completely invisible to conventional sensors, a ghost ship armed with weapons that existed nowhere in official records. Captain, his first officer, Commander Lisa Park, called from the weapons station. Project Prometheus is showing green across all boards. Dr. Kane's modifications are holding steady. Webb nodded, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. Around them, the remnants of humanity's colonial fleet were engaging the Kithaeron forces in a desperate holding action. Human ships were dying, but they were taking the enemy with them in ways that clearly surprised the aliens. The problem was numbers. For every Kithaeron ship destroyed, 2 more took its place, and their technology was centuries ahead of anything humanity possessed through conventional development. Fortunately, humanity had stopped relying on conventional development the moment they realized they weren't alone in the universe. Prometheus Control, this is Defiance Actual. Webb spoke into his headset. Request permission to execute Titan Gambit. The response came from Dr. Elizabeth Kane herself, her voice tight with concentration. Marcus, are you insane? We've never tested it at this scale. The gravitational calculations alone. Doctor, with respect, we're past the testing phase. Webb interrupted, watching another human cruiser die in a ball of plasma fire. Either it works, or we're all dead anyway. I call that acceptable risk parameters. A pause. Titan Gambit is authorized. God help us all. Webb turned to his crew, men and women who had volunteered for a mission they knew might be suicide. Ladies and gentlemen, today we find out if human engineering is as good as human stubbornness. Helm, set course for Kepler 442c. Kepler 442c was the system's largest moon, a rocky ball of iron and ice roughly half the size of Earth's moon. It had been humanity's mining headquarters until the evacuation order came through. Now it was going to become the largest weapon in human history. The Defiance slipped through the battle undetected, its stealth systems rendering it invisible to Kithaeron sensors. Behind them, Admiral Chen's forces continued their holding action, drawing the enemy fleet into an ever tighter formation. They didn't know what Webb was planning, but they trusted him to make it count. As they approached the moon, Webb opened a channel to the mining complex's automated systems. Prometheus 7, this is Defiance. Initiate mining protocol Omega. Deep within the moon, fusion charges that had been placed during the original mining operations began to activate. But these weren't standard mining charges. Over the past 5 years, teams of engineers had been quietly modifying the mining infrastructure, turning the entire moon into a massive kinetic weapon. Charges are armed and synchronized, Park reported. Trajectory calculations complete. We have a 97% probability of successful impact with the enemy fleet. Webb felt a cold smile cross his face. Then let's show these bastards what human engineering looks like when we're angry. The charges detonated in perfect sequence, fracturing the moon along predetermined stress lines. Massive chunks of rock and metal began separating. But this wasn't random destruction. Each piece had been calculated, their trajectories plotted to intersect with the Kithaeron fleet's formation. What happened next would be talked about in military academies for centuries. 23 pieces of moon, each one the size of a city, began accelerating toward the Kithaeron fleet at significant fractions of light speed. The aliens had perhaps 30 seconds to realize what was happening before the first impact. The lead Kithaeron dreadnought, a massive vessel that had survived the conquest of a dozen worlds, simply ceased to exist as a chunk of moon moving at 12% of light speed passed through the space it had occupied. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. War Commander Vextal, aboard his flagship Bone Crusher, watched in absolute horror as his fleet began dying in ways that defied every tactical manual ever written. These humans had weaponized a moon. They had turned an entire celestial body into ammunition. Evasive maneuvers, he screamed, but there was nowhere to run. The moon fragments had been precisely targeted, creating a kill zone that encompassed his entire formation. Ships that tried to escape found themselves in the path of even larger chunks of debris. In 18 minutes, the Kithaeron invasion fleet was reduced from 112 ships to 37. The survivors were scattered, damaged, and completely demoralized. But the humans weren't finished. All ships, this is Admiral Chen, came the broadcast that every surviving human vessel received. Phase 2 is authorized. Show them what we do to bullies. Across the system, automated beacons that had been placed during the original colonization efforts began activating. They weren't communication beacons, they were targeting systems. Within minutes, every Kithaeron ship was painted with targeting lasers from multiple sources. The second wave of the human counterattack came from the asteroid belt. Dozens of rocks that had been quietly fitted with drive systems and warheads began moving toward the surviving enemy ships. Unlike the moon fragments, these moved slowly enough for point defense systems to engage them. That was the point. While the Kithaerons focused on the obvious threats, they missed the real attack. Human ships that had been hiding in the debris field of their own destroyed vessels began emerging, their weapons charged and ready. At point-blank range, they opened fire on the distracted enemy vessels. The Battle of Kepler 442 bits lasted exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. When it was over, the Kithaeron invasion fleet had been completely destroyed. Not a single enemy ship escaped to report what had happened. But the war was far from over. 3 days later, aboard the repaired orbital station, Admiral Chen received a priority transmission from Earth. General Hayes appeared on the screen, his expression grim. "Sarah, we've got a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting massive fleet movements throughout Kithaeron space. They're not just sending another invasion force, they're mobilizing their entire military." Chen wasn't surprised. She'd expected this. "How long do we have?" "Best estimates are 6 weeks before they can bring their full strength to bear. We're talking about thousands of ships, Sarah. The entire Kithaeron Empire is coming to exterminate humanity." Chen looked out at the stars, where human engineers were already beginning construction of new defensive platforms. "Then we better get ready to give them the fight of their lives." Over the following weeks, Humanity underwent a transformation that astonished even themselves. Every shipyard in human space was retooled for military production. Civilian vessels were converted to warships. The asteroid belt became a fortress, bristling with weapons and defensive installations. But the most important change was in humanity itself. The casual destruction of civilian transports, the arrogant demands for surrender, the threat of extinction. These had awakened something primal in the human psyche. The same species that had climbed down from trees to hunt mammoth, that had crossed oceans in wooden ships, that had split the atom and reached for the stars, now focused all of their ingenuity and determination on a single goal. The Kitharans wanted war. Humanity would give them war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. When the Empire's grand fleet finally arrived at the edge of human space, they found something that made even their veteran commanders pause. The humans hadn't retreated. They hadn't tried to negotiate. Instead, they had turned their entire stellar neighborhood into a death trap. Every asteroid had been weaponized. Every moon was a potential kinetic strike. Every seemingly empty patch of space contained hidden weapons platforms and ships waiting in ambush. The humans had taken their entire civilization and turned it into a weapon. The final battle lasted 3 weeks. When it was over, the Kitharan Empire, conqueror of 47 star systems, terror of the galaxy for over 1,000 years, existed only in history books. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of humanity's newest fortress, watching the debris of the alien fleet drift past like snow. Behind her, Captain Webb and Dr. Kane discussed plans for exploring the former Kitharan territories, offering freedom to the dozens of enslaved species they would find there. "Admiral," Commander Park approached with a datapad. "We're receiving transmissions from 17 different alien governments. They're all requesting diplomatic contact." Chen smiled. Fear, it seemed, was an excellent foundation for respect. She activated the communications array, her voice carrying to every corner of human space and beyond. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Forces. To any who would threaten humanity or our allies, we are no longer the helpless species you thought you knew. We are no longer prey. Cross us at your peril." The message was received by hundreds of alien civilizations across the galaxy. Most filed it away as a curiosity. A few made note of these upstart humans who had somehow defeated the mighty Kitharan Empire. All of them would remember those words in the years to come, as humanity emerged from their small corner of space to become the galaxy's newest protectors. They had learned the hard way that some species should never be pushed too far. The humans had been pushed far enough. The war was over. The real work was just beginning.